The Prime Minister concedes the timetable for the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine could be delayed. And Joe Biden starts work to slow America's spread of COVID. Hello, Michael Tetlow with ABC Late News. Two state premiers are among the critics of a decision to award tennis great Margaret Court the highest Order of Australia honour. The LGBT community has also called for the award to be reconsidered, but Mrs Court says her critics should move on.
She's an Australian tennis legend, but news that Margaret Court will receive the highest Australia Day honour is being questioned by many, including two premiers.
I don't believe that she has views that accord with the vast majority of people across our nation that see people, particularly from the LGBTIQ community, as equal and deserving of dignity, respect and safety.
I know she already has an Order of Australia award. I think extra Order of Australia awards should go to unsung heroes across the country.
Mrs Court is set to be promoted to Companion of the Order for her service to tennis. She's currently an officer. She won 24 Grand Slam singles titles and was the first Australian female tennis player to win Wimbledon. But it's her views on the LGBTQI community that sparked this tweet from journalist Justin Smith that broke news of her award early. Margaret Court is going to be honoured on Australia Day with our highest honour. She shouldn't, and we need to have the debate before it happens. Mr Smith called for the award to be reconsidered. The Prime Minister says he has nothing to do with the process.
This is a completely independent, separate process, and those announcements will be made on the appropriate day. And it's a system that recognises Australians from right across the full spectrum of achievement in this country.
Even that LGBT in the schools, it's of the devil, it's not of God.
Many LGBTQI groups and tennis stars have spoken out against Mrs Court's comments over the years. The Australian Christian lobby says the awards shouldn't be based on a person's views.
Margaret Court has a track record of treating LGBTI people with dignity, with respect, and she's never discriminated against them. She doesn't share their view of the world, but that's part of living in a pluralistic society.
Today, the 78-year-old said her critics needed to move on.
And I teach the Bible, what God says in the Bible, and I think that is my right and my privilege.
And she likened the honour to winning the Grand Slam.
I think this one, it's like the icing on the cake and receiving an AC.
The controversy comes a year after men's rights commentator Bettina Arndt's Order of Australia honour. The council received numerous complaints, but she kept the award following a review. The full Australia Day honours are due to be announced next week. Jessica Warriner, ABC News.
Just weeks after bringing forward the timetable for the rollout of a COVID-19 vaccine, the Prime Minister has conceded it could now be delayed. Australia's ordered 10 million doses of the Pfizer jab, but the drug company's struggling to keep up with demand overseas. Here's political reporter Jane Norman.
Currently we're crying.
Stuck in locked-down London, rare repatriation flights offered Elise Brown a glimmer of hope for the first time in months.
They send you an email, they send you a link, they put out 2 flights, so that's 400 seats.
For the Melbourne researcher, there's an extra sense of urgency. Her contract with Cambridge University expires in March.
I tried 3 times to get through that system. They were gone in 10 minutes.
They were the first of 20 additional flights organised by the government to collect some of the 38,000 Australians stranded across the globe. Commercial options are proving unreliable. A week after cancelling all flights to the east coast of Australia, Emirates has announced it'll resume services next week.
The only thing that actually helps is if the government changes the caps.
And that won't be happening anytime soon. National Cabinet maintaining the reduced cap of 4,100 arrivals a week until mid-February.
We're in this mess because Scott Morrison has refused to deliver a safe national quarantine system.
We have to put the public health and safety within our borders first.
The next step in ensuring the health and safety of all Australians is the nationwide rollout of a COVID-19 vaccine. The government had hoped the first jabs would be administered within weeks, but the Prime Minister's now hinting at possible delays. The independent regulator is yet to approve any vaccine for use here in Australia, and the front-runner Pfizer is facing production hold-ups in Europe. Australia's ordered 10 million doses of the Pfizer jab, all of which will be made overseas.
We've set out indicative timeframes when we would hope to commence in mid to late February, but that will obviously change.
When the first vaccines do roll out, aged care residents and workers will be first in line, but it won't be compulsory for them for now.
That doesn't mean that mightn't be a position in the future.
Getting the vaccine here, the first step. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
Google is threatening to cut off Australian access to its search engine if a world-first media code becomes law. Tech giants have fronted a parliamentary inquiry looking into the code, which would see them forced to pay Australian media companies to publish their news stories. Political reporter Melissa Clark has more.
We're still searching.
There have been inquiries, drafts, negotiations and compromise, but Google is still not happy.
It's not compatible with how search engines work or how the internet works.
And willing to abandon the Australian market.
If this version of the code were to become law, it would give us no real choice but to stop making Google search available in Australia.
Facebook too says it may limit some of its services.
We have not threatened. We've explained, and we think this in order to inform the policy-making process.
The digital giants are resisting a mandatory media bargaining code.
We're not opposed to a code, and we're not opposed to paying publishers for value, but the details matter.
If a deal can't be reached to pay local media companies when news stories are republished, an arbitrator will be called in to force an outcome.
They've shown that they're not afraid to bully, intimidate and make changes to their service. They walk and talk and act like monopolies because they are monopolies.
Google and Facebook have more than 80% of the digital advertising market in Australia. Google's algorithms control 95% of general searches, and 17 million Australians, nearly 70% of the population, use Facebook.
The only way you'll get a commercial deal is if you've got some muscle in the arm of the news media businesses. That muscle is the code.
Australian media companies are united, and the Prime Minister is on their side.
We don't respond to threats.
Both sides are digging in. For Australia's media industry, it's a battle for survival. For Google and Facebook, it's a challenge to their global dominance, given other countries could adopt Australia's rules. But that fear could also be cause for compromise. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
A UN treaty banning nuclear weapons is coming into effect after being ratified by more than 50 countries. But nuclear powers and their allies, including Australia and Japan, have refused to sign up, claiming it won't achieve its purpose. North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer reports from Hiroshima.
A wartime decision that changed the world forever.
First there was a flash. My father quickly covered my body without knowing what it was. I lost consciousness, and when I woke up there were fires and bodies everywhere.
Hiroshima today bears few signs of the devastation wrought by the American bombing 75 years ago, but it's left an indelible mark on the survivors and generations of Japanese. Hiroshi Harada was 6 when the bomb was dropped. He's spent his entire life dedicated to abolishing nuclear weapons.
I want to warn that this is something that mankind should never experience again.
71 states refused to back the ban at the UN, including those with nuclear arsenals such as Russia, India, China and the US. Australia argued it would be inconsistent with our US alliance obligations and would not eliminate a single nuclear weapon. Japan said volatility in the region means it's important to support realistic measures as well as to strengthen deterrence.
The United States made it very clear to Australia, to Japan and to other allies that it wanted them to abstain from the negotiations.
For victims, their most powerful tools in the campaign to abolish nuclear weapons are their experiences. But COVID-19 has disrupted major anniversaries, and lectures from atomic bomb survivors at the local museum are down 90%. Here at the Hiroshima Peace Park, the memorials will live on, but survivors fear time is running out for them to continue sharing their stories.
Unfortunately, the Japanese government is turning the other way, and we need to think how we can take action.
US President Joe Biden has vowed to reduce the role that nuclear weapons play. At Ground Zero, the survivors hope they've started a movement to go much further than that. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Hiroshima.
Joe Biden has started wielding power to try to slow America's spread of COVID-19. On his first full day in the White House, the US president signed off on a barrage of orders reaffirming his commitment to get more Americans vaccinated. But he's warned things will get worse before they get better, with the nation expected to hit 500,000 COVID deaths next month. Correspondent Greg Jennett is in Washington.
This executive order I'm signing is strengthening the supply chain.
Armed only with a bank of presidential pens, the Commander-in-Chief took command.
400,000 Americans have died. That's more than have died in all of World War II.
With each order, he conscripted Americans to take up arms against an enemy overrunning them.
This is a wartime undertaking.
A safe and effective vaccine at breakneck speed.
Donald Trump's Operation Warp Speed turns out to have been a sluggish misnomer. Military powers will now be invoked to accelerate it by ordering more manufacturing of syringes and supplies. Federally run emergency vaccination centres are on their way. All incoming passengers must be tested before travel and quarantine on arrival. Masks will be made compulsory for interstate travel to keep a Biden goal on track.
This is the plan. This is the plan.
100 million shots in arms in the next 99 days.
Our national strategy is comprehensive. It's based on science, not politics. It's based on truth, not denial.
Scientific advice the new administration's relying on comes from the same expert the previous one had, until Donald Trump placed him on the outer. So how does Anthony Fauci feel now?
There were things that were said that really was uncomfortable because they were not based on scientific fact. Let the science speak. It is somewhat of a liberating feeling.
America's abysmal pandemic performance is the result of collective failure. Much, but not all of the blame can be sheeted home to Washington. Even so, the Biden administration's positioning itself to reap the credit for any turnaround when it comes, and to ensure Donald Trump bears full responsibility for the disastrous last year. Democrats still hold him accountable for this year too. They now control the Senate, which will hold a trial on Mr. Trump's impeachment charge of inciting insurrection.
It will be soon. I don't think it will be long.
A true test of whether unity's possible in post-Trump politics.
All three of us are lucky to be the president of this country.
And it's an exciting time.
There's no problem they can't solve when we're working together.
Judgment is coming. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Washington.
The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for twin suicide bombings in the Iraqi capital that ripped through a busy market, killing at least 32 people. The second bomber struck as people rushed to help victims of the first attack. More than 100 people were injured. It's the first deadly attack in Baghdad for 3 years.